we both come from Christian backgrounds. All of us really here to just
Right.
because we're in a Christian culture. I mean, but
In,
the
in the
whole
water.
what's that? It's in the water.
In the water.
It's true. I mean, um, the whole notion of prayer and trusting and all of that, it has, for me, it's much more meaningful now.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
It's really, and sometimes it feels like two paths, like, you know, often it does. But to take heart in compassion, because even the portrayal of the central figure, even the portrayal of Christ, has him saying, "Look, I'd really rather not do this. I mean, if there's any way I can avoid this, can I please avoid this? Nevertheless, I know it's going to happen the way you will. I mean, it's like not really in my hands, and so I surrender." But so there's an acknowledgement of kind of the dual human and divine nature, but that's true for us in general. Like, in other words, you can be like actually not feeling in alignment with what's happening. And that's also expressed, and that's an expression of this child of God. So it isn't that there aren't specific things that matter. They do matter, but
Mhm.
ultimately they don't matter. But relatively, they really do matter. So, and that's that whole thing again. We've had conversations about this recently about embodiment and things like that. It's like really important to take care of your
Mhm.
own healing and all of those things. In practice, it can be absolutely necessary in practice. Even in Buddhism, that's there. They talk about how um, you have to take advantage of the situation you're in as a human being who is um, um, who has the right conditions, circumstances, and conditions,
Mhm.
because they can go away. Like, oh, you have free time, now you can do Dharma. You might not have free time later on. You find that you have enough money to take care of your loved ones and eat and all of that. Well, that's not going to be here forever, so we better right now um, practice meditation, practice self-inquiry, do what you need to do to awaken and all of that, because you don't know how long those circumstances will continue. And yet, you can be starving in the street, homeless, and have an awake. So there's always that. Um, so there's importance. There's importance. Um, it comes down to trust. That's the main thing, because everything else falls apart. And it comes down to faith. It comes down to trust. It really comes down to faith that um, your path, or what you have in front of you, is exactly what's supposed to happen and exactly what you need. And again, saying that doesn't mean that you don't, the next moment where you go, this isn't supposed to be happening, I have to do something else. That's also part of what there is. Yeah, there's this thing brings to mind the whole thing about spiritual guidance and the issue with dualistic notions of God. And again, nothing true can be spoken when it comes to these realms. It's always nuanced. So, because I don't even really have an issue with, or put it this way, I don't think there's a way to talk about God without having some dualism in the language or the way that we talk about it. But the whole thing I came up against from my background earlier in my life was God as an external figure was something like an overbearing parent. And so because of that, what it meant um, to trust guidance was um, dangerous and dicey and uncertain because God was somewhere out there and he made demands on me that other people made clear what they were. But there was all this thing of um, the uncertainty of us. I'm really hearing God. Am I really, is it God or is it somebody else? I'm not sure. There's somebody out there. There was always the devil to tempt me into and deceiving, coming as an angel of light, possibly. So there was always the like way that I couldn't trust that and I could not trust myself because God was separate.
Yeah,
I was separate.
yeah, and that's, we've talked about this, how that's kind of foundational, almost that the authority is out there. And so, you know, yeah, I've heard you talk about trust 100 times possibly, but I can tell you this time the impact is that it is kind of a further relaxation in a way, because it's like part of my process here is moving into more trust and more, like of that inner way
Right.
that I'm not separate from God. So, you know, I don't know how we got past you're created in the image of God, but that was kind of like said often, but kind of like, but it's kind of like swept aside or something. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't really taken to heart. Um, and of course, in all of non-dual teaching, it's like it is the heart. It is the yeah.
It is the heart. Yeah, it really is. Well, it's a matter of emphasis, I think, in both places. Like again, because in order to even have anything like a path, you have to have some acknowledgement of duality. So, and that's and in terms of the dualistic traditions, there's always been an ongoing argument. Um, but it's like, yeah, in the West, the dualistic strain of the traditions dominates the tradition. And sometimes, you know, when the other shows up, it's even to the point where it becomes the heresies and has to go underground and become a cult and all that stuff. It's not that there isn't any non-dual teaching within mainstream Christianity. There is, but only among the highest mystics. And it's considered like for the super mature because otherwise it can become dangerous and you can abandon the entire dualistic framework altogether. And then, now you're again, that's the satanic figure, like, or something like, that's the worst that you can do is you can think you're God. And there's something to that because that is particularly in the West. It's understood in the East that it's harder for that to happen. It does, but it's much harder because of the whole idea, the emphasis on no self and all of the impersonalness of your own nature. Um,
Well, it's also maybe it begins as a different concept of God, like the Western concept or the Christian concept possibly is,
yeah,
like you said, is kind of the more of a like a personified, you know, it's Michelangelo's God with the beard.
right. Outward, like a father, yeah, like more like Zeus almost.
Right.
You imagine Zeus,
Just the
but
way.
like the irony is, even among the pagans, you had the regular people who thought of God, Zeus as a big father figure, and then you had the philosophers who realized that Zeus was the good or the one. So it was, again, non-dual. You do have very dualistic schools in India, but even they and very dualistic, and they're very, extremely popular. So it's not just non-dual schools in India at all. In fact, the
Right.
majority are some kind of amalgam or modified non-dualism. But even the most dualistic schools, well, I don't know, might not. It's hard to say, but still, God is more. Um, God and man, even though Madhav would never, he would always like to say they're as separate as can be, but they're all eternal. It's still different. God, human souls are eternal also, and so is primal matter. In other words, it's not like God. There's nothing, and there's this God, and then He makes everything. It's more that what they mean when they talk dualistically is that in the most extreme dualist school, like Madhav's school, has other beings existing, but they're dependent on God. But they're dependent on God eternally into the past. It wasn't like they suddenly got created. So even the most dualistic schools in India are still more non-dualistic than they are in regular Christianity, where you have a really outside God that usually, popular Christianity where people are outside. The thing is that once there's a recognition that God is all pervasive, then, and you're not separate, then, the thing that they're trying to guard against with the anti-heresy thing is that you would inflate that I am God, I, me, this individual person. And there may be times when it's appropriate to speak that way, as a sense of emphasis and ecstasy. It isn't really ultimately that you are God. It's more like um, God manifests as you and as well as everything else.
That's it, right. And God is me. Yeah,
Right. It's more like God is you. Exactly.
I'm the wave.
Right. Exactly. We're the waves. And if we say we, then in that moment we're identifying ourselves as bodies and minds. But so the thing is, attention can transcend mere identification with the body and the mind. And in that case,
Mhm.
you are God, but only as silence. As soon as you speak and say I, it's the body that's speaking and the emotions and all of that. But there can be that seeing, like, aha, the space that this body and mind is arising in, and the space that the rest of the universe is arising in, same space, same intelligent space that's being all of this. And that intelligent space that's being all of this is beyond the wave's capacity um, to conceptualize, to grasp.
Right.
But it is, um, and this is the word. See, the word Shankara made a big deal of like, okay, he calls it yana, knowing, but it's not knowing as an object of knowledge outside of yourself. So I don't know if you remember Adi Da. He liked this word intuit. He used to use it that way, intuition. That is, that you don't know as an object that God is you, but you know in your guts, you intuit it, you recognize it, you realize that that's the way it has to be, and the realization is not simply intellectual. It's like a great trust that what else that I'm contained in God, that He's the ground, um, but not that I can know. Okay, or think of a big, you know, word balloon above the head or thought balloon. No, you can't know God that way.
Right.
I mean, you can say you can be God. I mean, this is the reason love works. And this is the reason it's okay to do dualistic worship. Because once you recognize it's all the same, then whether you love Krishna or Christ or Buddha, Padmasambhava, they're all forms. They're not the ultimate. Any of the forms are not, but they're a means. They're a focal point. I think the word's Kibla. Is that right? Do you know that? Anybody? Kibla.
I don't know that word.
Do you know this, Ellis? No? I think it's the word. I might be wrong. I might be pronouncing it wrong. It's it's interesting. It's like a nave. It's like in a mosque. There's usually they build it in where there's a little cove. You know what it's like, and some people think it actually came from this. I mean, who knows? But it always was that Muhammad had people praying in the same direction. So originally, early on at the beginning, it was Jerusalem. Everybody prayed in the direction of Jerusalem, and then after I think it was after Medina, he changed everything so that everyone was pointing in the direction of Mecca. So everybody was praying in the direction of Mecca. So how do you know where the direction of Mecca is? Well, one story I heard, I don't know if Muslims would agree with this. They might, but I don't know. Is that what they noticed is in Catholic churches often you have you can see this like I remember in the big cathedrals. I don't mean small churches. They used to have in the back of the church behind the altar. So you have the main altar. Behind the main altar, you had a womb, and the Virgin Mary was back there. And you'd have a little shrine to the Virgin Mary behind the main altar. So it was literally like an outcrop built, right? Like a womb, like a cave. And that's where Mary was. So the mosques, they would build, everything would be the same in the mosque. It would usually be, kind of a circle. But they would figure out where Mecca was, doing whatever map making skills the word. It's okay, let's say it's east. That's east. So they would build a little cove and everybody, the Qibla, and everybody would face that cove because that's where Mecca was. So the style of the building supposedly came from the early Christian cathedrals when the Muslims started building nice mosques. They would always have this thing. And so in a lot of mosques, you'll see this Qibla. It's a direction. It's sort of what the with this is this is mixing traditions. It's not really, but I mean the Saguna Brahman, which is what the Hindus would call it, like they're God with forms just for the sake of people, just for our own sake. We want a form, and it becomes an idol if you actually believe that that particular deity is the deity. And it's an endpoint. Then you can't go any further. So if it's opaque, it becomes an idol. But if it's translucent, if you can see through it like a stained glass window to the light on the other side, then it's an icon. It's a Qibla. It's a direction toward prayer. It's not the actual thing. I mean, Muslims don't have any images. So it makes perfect sense that they have an empty place. No Virgin Mary, no statue, no image at all. But just that empty place, that's the direction to which everybody prays. So it's totally natural to have that, to love God in a form. Remember, Ramana Maharshi was asked about this once. An Indian man asked Ramana about Muslims not having a God with a form. And Ramana asked, they have a holy book, right? And said, yes. Is God described in that holy book? Yes. Then he has a form. He might only have a mental form, but he has a nature. He's like this and he's not like that. You have a conceptual nature of God. That's still a form. So the real God is behind even that. It's not that that isn't a God. A mental concept of a God is, but it's more like a Qibla. It's more like a direction in order to be able to face in a particular direction to to bow, to bow. So it's totally okay for us to worship God in whatever form comes to us in our lives, or whatever form has been given to us that we feel attracted to. That's beautiful. No problem. It's just that that's an icon. Hmm.